Hi, Yusek.
Please stand by. Please stand by.
Hi,
Magandang
Carol.
umaga po mga kaibigan. Welcome to another edition of our Roundtable with Philippine Press Institute. Before I introduce our guests today, let's have a few words from Ariel and our friend from Hans Seidel Foundation. Ariel, take it away.
Hi, good morning, Kuya Melo. Good morning to our audience, both watching us in the meeting room and via live streaming. Magandang umaga po sa inyo wherever you are. I hope you're all safe. Today, on our second month of Roundtable, we are going to talk again about COVID. I think we'll never be tired talking about it because a lot of people have been asking already many times, where's the vaccine now? What's going to happen about herd community? What's herd community? And then questions like who gets vaccinated first, etc. What is the strain all about? Is it more powerful than the first one? And things like those have to be discussed openly for to engage the public in a more significant discourse. I think at this point, people should not be confused already in terms of it's appreciation on reportage or narratives on COVID. Having said that, I just would like to say that there's another website, the PPI, which actually focuses a repository of a lot of community reports on COVID. That's www.ppinewscommons.net. Anything you want to know about anything on the ground, community reports written by journalists outside Metro Manila, you can just click to on that website. It's being supported by Hans Seidel Foundation, much as Hans Seidel Foundation also supports this kind of activity every month up until the end of the year. And among other things, have been supporting, like, the coming elections reportage by second half of the year. Having said that, we'd like to thank the Hans Seidel Foundation for being so supportive. We cannot find any organization that will really have to support this kind of activities. Um, Please welcome our good friend who's also been supportive of TP activities and also championing media causes and press freedom in the Philippines. And not only, because they talk about federalism as well as part of their agency's mandate, but really supporting a lot of media activities in the Philippines through the Philippine Press Institute. Please welcome the resident representative of Hans Silo Foundation to the Philippines, Attorney Guts Heineke. Good morning, Guts. Hi.
Good morning, Ariel. Thank you very much. Good morning, Yusek. Good morning, Milo. Good morning to everyone. Yes, my name is Götz Heineke. I'm the resident representative for the Hans Seidel Foundation here in the Philippines in Makati. I am currently, of course, in Makati during all this COVID pandemic. I was here. Our office was closed, and now it's a little bit open, but not fully open. I think at the moment, yeah, we are all in the same. Yeah, in German we say we are on the same boat. We are one team, and we are all depending on the developments on this COVID pandemic. And therefore, congratulations, PPI and Ariel. Congratulations as well to Melo for this wonderful topic for our roundtable discussion this morning. I think it's really interesting for the whole nation and for everyone. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German political foundation. It's a German NGO with the goal to build up democracy and good governance. We are here in the Philippines already since 1979, so 42 years now. And when I say good governance, democracy, development, of course, a key player for all these nice words are journalists, because journalists need to inform the population about what's currently going on. Let's say it easy. And that's already the background why we are working together with PPI, because we think that's a good channel how to support journalism here in the Philippines. We share the same values as the PPI. So for both of us, civic journalism is the keyword, and that's what we are following together. Beside that, we have some other collaborations as well, especially with some state actors like the DOJ. We are working together with the PMP, PPSC, the NCMF, National Commission on Muslim Filipinos. So it's not Hans Seidel Foundation. It's not only about journalism and federalism. It's we also have got some other projects here in the country. Coming back, of course, I'm German. COVID-19 is everywhere in the world, and I think, yeah, we are all together. I can assure you we have the same discussions as we have in the Philippines. We have it in Germany. I was recently talking with my father. He's 85 years old. Recently was yesterday. Of course, my father is quite angry about the development in Germany. It's going too slow. He's unhappy with the politicians. Nothing is going on. So personally, I've got the feeling that these kind of discussions at the moment we have everywhere in the world. Everybody is tired after 1 year of pandemic, and everybody is looking forward to go back to the to the old normal as soon as possible. But I think personally, yeah, we just need to be a little bit more patient. We went already so far. We are on a good way, and we survived for 1 year. So let's survive for another few months. Having said that, yeah, I wish us all a wonderful conference this morning, wonderful discussions, wonderful questions, and I hope everybody can enjoy and learn something. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gats. Back to you, Kuya Melo.
Thank you. Thank you. Mga kaibigan, COVID-19 brought untold miseries not only to Filipinos but to everyone worldwide. Since the first press conference of our good friend Secretary Francisco Duque III and the WHO representative to the Philippines, Rabindra Abeyasinghe, at the National Blood Center in January 29 last year, we've been at a loss, worried how we will deal with the virus, saddened by the fact we lost our friends along the way due to COVID-19, frustrated because a lot lost their job and movement was restricted, and naturally, the economy has taken unimaginable consequences. Today, we have the opportunity to look back. As they say, hindsight offers a perfect vision. This will also be the appropriate time to look forward and see the possibilities of getting over this sad chapter in our contemporary history. We have distinguished guests to sit with us and discuss thoroughly on our topic, COVID-19, the real score. Where are we today and where are we headed? Leading our guests today is Undersecretary Maria Rosario Singh Vergere. Siya po yung madalas makita sa press briefings ng DOH at ng Malacanang. Siya po ang tagapagsalita ng Department of Health. Makakasama rin po natin si General Restituto Padilla, tagapagsalita ng National Task Force versus COVID-19. Kasama na po natin si Father Nick R. Austriaco Jr. Siya po ay isang Dominican missionary and a PhD, a molecular biologist and moral theologian. Baka kasama rin natin, hopefully, si Dr. Benita Ponyo, a psychiatrist, to tell us her views about the impact of COVID-19 sa psyche ng Pilipino. Hopefully, makakapasok siya. Narito na rin po naman si Ginoong JC Punong Bayan. Siya po ay isang PhD candidate sa UP School of Economics. And hopefully, si Dr. Antonio Danz will also join us today. But to tell us more about what's going on, let's welcome Undersecretary Rosario Vergere. Good morning, Madam, and welcome to the discussions. Ano po ang inyong opening statement?
Good morning, Mr. Melo Acuña. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Good morning to Mr. Aris Sebelino, Executive Director of the Philippine Press Institute. Good morning, Mr. Heineke from the Hans Seidel Foundation. Of course, we have our friends, our partners, Father Nick. Magandang umaga po. Mr. Punong Bayan from the UP School of Economics, and the other panelists. Magandang umaga. So with the ongoing pandemic and infodemic, there exists a demand for relevant and timely information on the government's efforts to decrease COVID-19 infections and to ease the strain in our health system through various interventions that we are already implementing, such as preventing it, detecting, isolating, testing, treating, and reintegrating. And our plan right now of immunizing majority of Filipinos by 2021. So in this kind of forum or RTDs, in this endeavor, the role of media and ordinary individuals are highlighted more than ever. So I have slides, Mr. Acuna, if you would allow me to present briefly.
Please do so.
Thank you. Can we share my slides, please? So as we wait for my slides to be flashed, I just like to share that I will be giving information on the current updates on the case summary of for COVID-19 in the country. I will also give you brief information on how we have fared across the different strategies being employed by government. And also I will give you some strategies that we are now employing with this vaccine deployment program.
Let me check. Sandali lang po. Hinahanap
Yes,
ko po yung inyong presentation. But you can also present it there because you're allowed to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share screen.
Naka-share screen na po kayo, madam. You may try your slides.
Give me 2 minutes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. No problem. No problem. We're also joined by Major General Resty Padilla of the National Task Force versus COVID-19. Magandang umaga po and welcome. So we will have the short presentation of Yusek Berhere. Tapos mamaya ng konti mula sa National Task Force, ano na nangyari? Ano ba ang sitwasyon? Ano ba ang pwedeng gawin? And then we'll have the impact on the economy. And then si Father Nick will also give his opening statements. Madam, we're ready as you are, if you are.
Yes, sir. I'm asking my staff to join the meeting so that they can flash the slides. But if I
Yes, ma'am.
start already, I will just mention the first few slides, and then maybe my staff can already flash as I speak.
Okay.
So to give a brief situationer, as of February 16, we have recorded already a total of 552,246 COVID-19 cases, where 5.2% are active cases, 92.7% have recovered, while our case fatality rate is at 2.1%. For the active cases, majority still are mild and asymptomatic. So for the past 11 to 12 months, it has been evident that a national government-enabled, local government-led approach to a people-centered response was needed to solidify our strategies for COVID-19. So we would like to recognize the efforts of our media partners in disseminating the right information about COVID-19. So for the PREVENT strategy, we have launched the Be the Solution campaign, which is a behavioral campaign designed to help raise awareness about the 4 key preventive behaviors against COVID-19. And these are our minimum public health standards. Bawal walang mask, sanitize ang kamay at iwas hawak sa mga bagay, physical distancing, and alamin ang totoong informasyon. So we already have implemented this in the different barangays, and we have started doing surveys for us to identify gaps and create appropriate strategies in how we implement the minimum public health standards. To further strengthen our behavioral campaigns, we already have partnered with both the public and the private sector. Currently, we are partnering with 14 national government agencies and 26 private companies who are all supporting in the dissemination of these BIDA materials. The private sector also provides hygiene kits as we go through the different barangays of the country. Next slide, please. For the DETECT strategy, contact tracing is implemented, and this is spearheaded by the Department of Interior and Local Government. As of February 14, we have now a total of 239,238 contact tracers with a case-to-close contact ratio of 1:6. Contact tracing is just one aspect of cutting the lines of transmission. Hence, the management of tracing after tracing a close contact bears the same weight as the contact tracing itself. As of now, we have a total of 411,617 confirmed cases traced, 2.2 million contacts traced and assessed, 1.3 million who completed quarantine, and 1.2 million who were tested for RT-PCR. Next slide, please. Detecting the presence of COVID-19 virus through testing is one of the cornerstones in providing the appropriate management in each COVID-19 case. Hence, the expansion of our laboratory capacity aided us greatly in our pandemic response. We have come a long way in terms of testing. From just one laboratory at the outset, we now have 221 licensed COVID-19 testing laboratories across the country. We also have increased our testing capacity from just 300 tests per day in March to a 7-day moving average daily output of 33,464 as of February 14. As of today, we have already conducted a total of 8.3 million tests and already tested 7.8 million individuals. Our positivity rate for the past 7 days is 5.8%, close to the WHO benchmark of 5%. Next slide, please. For isolate, from one quarantine facility in New Clark City in our early response against COVID-19 that only catered to our repatriated Filipinos to 9,647 temporary treatment and monitoring facilities all over the country. We have a total bed capacity of 146,636 as of February 14. We also have a total of 11 mega temporary treatment and monitoring facilities in the National Capital Region, in Region 3, and Region 7 with a total bed capacity of 2,361 with a 33% occupancy rate. Next slide, please. As of February 14, our national healthcare utilization rate is as follows. For our 8,324 ward beds, we have a 23% occupancy rate. For our 17,335 isolation beds, 34% is occupied. For our 2,051 ICU beds, 38% are occupied, while 20% of our mechanical ventilators are currently being used. So if you try to see our healthcare utilization, we are at that low risk where there is still capability of the system to manage more cases or accommodate more cases and patients with COVID-19. Next slide, please. So aside from the strategies of PDITR, we are now starting the rollout for COVID-19 vaccination. So we have seen significant developments in COVID-19 vaccines, both globally and locally. So we are now going to present to you our national vaccination deployment plan. Next slide, please. So this is just the vision, mission, and goal of our vaccination program, where it is our mission to institutionalize an end-to-end immunization program for COVID-19, which will eventually protect the public and reduce COVID-19 cases and deaths, effectively reducing the strain in our healthcare system. Next slide, please. So listed here are the pre-implementation and implementation activities. And just for everybody's information, most of these activities had been implemented already. So this is very essential and complex due to the rapidly evolving scientific data. That's why we need to plan and plot the step-by-step process. Also part of our pre-implementation phase, we will be running simulation activities, and we have done just that in the past weeks, wherein we need to see how we are going to implement the step-by-step process. We have also run a simulation for the profiling, screening, and registration processes using a digital platform so that we can identify possible gaps. Lastly, we are going to utilize a fixed post-vaccination strategy where our health facilities will be utilized as vaccination sites through a model similar to that of our COMELEC election poll sites. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we will see the emergency use authority. So this is to ensure that we will have quality, safe, and efficacious vaccines that will come in the country. The WHO has highlighted the need for the existence of a risk-based, expedited regulatory approval pathway for COVID-19 vaccines. Acknowledging this, the government has issued Executive Order 121, or the authority of the FDA to issue an emergency use authority for COVID-19 drugs and vaccines. Correspondingly, FDA soon released their circular for the implementing guidelines in the issuance of this EUA. Evidences that we require for the issuance of the EUA include clinical trial data on Asians or Pacific Islanders to determine the effect of the product to our population. Through all of these requirements, developers must prove that the benefits outweigh the possible risk. Next slide, please. As mandated in the Universal Healthcare Law, the Department of Health can only procure health technologies upon the positive recommendation of the Health Technology Assessment Council. Shown here is the criteria developed by the HTAC for evaluating COVID-19 vaccines. The 6 decision criteria are meant to answer policy questions. First, responsiveness to magnitude and severity. Is COVID-19 a significant health problem given its magnitude and severity? Clinical efficacy and safety. What is the efficacy and duration of immunity? What are the safety issues associated with its use? Do the benefits outweigh the risk? Responsiveness to equity is the third question. How will this impact inequities? Which groups would be at a disadvantage? Fourth is social impact. Can the vaccine be accessed and be made available? And is it acceptable to most of the stakeholders? Fifth would be affordability and viability. What is the cost of vaccine implementation? Is it in line with the budget of the government? Does it represent a good value in preventing mortality and morbidity? And lastly, household financial impact. What is the effect on the out-of-pocket expenditures of Filipinos? Once all of these are covered, the HTAC can now provide a recommendation to the Secretary of Health regarding the said vaccines. Next slide, please. So where are we now? As we all know, the Philippines will be given initially a total of 117,000 worth of Pfizer vaccines from COVAX facility. So the schedule of these vaccines will be given in due time as we are now finalizing indemnification agreements with the COVAX facility and its manufacturers. We also have conducted readiness assessment across the various local governments and hospitals that we will be implementing this vaccine deployment. We also have conducted inventory checks in Royal Cargo, Unilab, RITM, and Zwillig Pharma for the storage facilities that we will be needing for this vaccine deployment program. Next slide, please. So this would be our prioritization framework for this vaccine deployment. Even if safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines will officially be authorized for emergency use and eventually licensed by FDA, these vaccines will not be immediately available in amounts sufficient to vaccinate a large portion of the adult Filipino population. Hence, prioritization is imperative. The framework for prioritization of priority population groups and corresponding sub-prioritization criteria shall be aligned with the objectives of ensuring reduction of mortality and preservation of health system capacity. The first criterion then should be based on priority groups that are most at risk. Hence, the first priority are the healthcare workers, then our senior citizens, persons with comorbidities until the remaining eligible population. According to the order of precedence of priority population groups, the preceding priority groups shall be provided nationwide access first before providing access to the next priority group, meaning we need to finish one sector first before we go on to the next priority sector. If the incoming vaccine supply is less than the number of people in the population group selected for vaccination, then we have to do sub-prioritization, which is based on Criterion 2. Next slide, please. Criterion 2 will be based on geographic location. Sub-prioritization shall be conducted within a priority population group through selection of geographic areas if there is insufficient incoming supply of vaccines. Sub-prioritization shall be based on COVID-19 burden of disease, like the current active cases, the attack rate per 100,000 population in the past 4 weeks, and population density. And also, the capacity of the local governments or the hospital, their readiness as to supply chain capability to mount a vaccination campaign. If the vaccine supply is still less than the number of people in the population group selected for vaccination, sub-prioritization may again be employed based on Criterion 3. Next slide, please. For Criterion 3, sub-prioritization will be based on exposure and mortality risk. The national government can adopt similar sub-prioritization by other countries of reputable health institutions such as the Centers for Disease Control. For example, for the Pfizer vaccines, we have done prioritization and we were able to go until the criterion 3 because of the insufficient doses. So we use the geographic burden per geographic location, and we know that the National Capital Region has the highest burden of disease and the number of active cases. So they were identified as our priority. And then we went to sub-prioritization, criterion 3, where we started doing the hospitals, starting identifying eligible hospitals based on their occupancy rate and based on the number of COVID dedicated beds. So based on criterion 3, among our healthcare workers, we have sub-prioritized COVID-19 referral hospitals designated by the Department of Health, hospitals providing COVID-19 care starting from level 3 hospitals and from DOH and then local governments and then private hospitals. Third would be isolation and quarantine facilities such as temporary treatment and monitoring facilities and repurposed facilities like hotels, schools, and the others. Fourth, the remaining hospitals, including facilities of uniformed services and those that do not cater to COVID-19 cases. Fifth would be our city health offices, rural health units, and barangay health stations. Sixth, standalone facilities, clinics and diagnostic centers, and other facilities otherwise not specified dealing with COVID-19 cases, such as our laboratories and also those research institutions and those providing screening and case management for COVID-19. And the last would be the closed healthcare institutions, such as the nursing homes. Other methods of sub-prioritization for other priority groups may further be developed as the need arises. Just to give you information, that this prioritization framework was a product of discussions with our National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, and they were the ones who recommended this, and this was approved by the National Task Force and the Vaccine Czar, Secretary Galvez, and also Secretary Duque. Next slide, please. So for adverse events following immunization, once the vaccines are widely available in our country, nationwide simultaneous rollout shall follow. So there is a need to proactively respond to the possible adverse events that might follow after immunization. So the major goal of vaccine safety surveillance is early detection and appropriate and timely response to adverse events. So we already have we are adopting this framework based on the WHO framework, and we also have already placed specific levels of referral so that we can be able to refer at once these adverse events. We also have reporting systems that we can do surveillance among these people who will have adverse events following immunization. Just to give information to everybody that the adverse events following immunization, specifically for COVID-19, is very small. The risk of having adverse events is very minimal, and our experts can give this information where they say that it is less than 10 per a million population. So it's very minimal. So people do not need to be hesitant in receiving these vaccines. Next slide, please. So with my last two slides, now as vaccination comes closer, we are asked how can media personnel contribute to increasing vaccine confidence. So ang lagi po namin sinasabi, let us be agents of tamang impormasyon. We need to share accurate information. We need to take active steps to be informed. We can organize fora to engage others constructively, and you can join DOH organized or DOH partner sponsored webinars and trainings. We need to report fake news so this can be debunked, and if we are needed to answer surveys or join in focus group discussions, and then we may do so. So we are expecting and we are encouraging that you be champions for our vaccination strategy. And sa mga munting ginagawa po natin, sa pakikinig lang ng webinar, tayo po ay nakakatulong para po dito sa overall vaccination efforts. Next slide, please. So as we forge ahead in addressing this crisis, we call on our media friends to be the solution. While COVID-19 represents a significant threat, every crisis also presents opportunities for sustained innovation and learning. So you are our country's champions in this pandemic. And while waiting for the vaccines, and even when the vaccines are here already, please let us continue and encourage others to practice our BIDA solution, the minimum public health standards, for us to be able to continue on and shift into our new normal. Next slide, please. So we have changed yung ating pong BIDA solution. It's now called BIDA Plus solution because we are encouraging people to support FDA-approved vaccines for the prevention of COVID-19. So once FDA approves of a vaccine, we can now guarantee that it is safe, quality, and effective. So hopefully this can be disseminated, and we hope that this media forum or this roundtable discussion can help us disseminate correct information regarding the response of government and regarding vaccines. Maraming salamat po. Over to you, Mr. Acuña.
Wonderful presentation.
Yeah.
Maganda po ito. We learned a lot, but we will have some questions for you a bit later. General Resty Padilla, how is it from your task force? What have you done before we talk about the impact on the economics? No? General Padilla, please. Good morning and welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Melo, and good morning to everyone. Dr. Rosette Verhere, USEC, good morning, and to all the other staff from DOH. Father, good morning po, and to all the colleagues you have within the roundtable discussion this morning. First off, I'd like to pass on the apologies of Secretary Galvez. He has been following a very hectic schedule. He was in Davao last night, and they did some code visits and came back, I think, very late last night also.
Yeah.
And today, I think they will again face the Senate or some members of Congress to talk about some of the issues that are still confronting our vaccine program. So suffice to say, many of the information you might want to hear from me and from Secretary Galvez have been discussed by USEC Rosette already, and they were very comprehensive. And that's how our DOH team has been moving along. No? Magagaling po yan. Lagi natin dapat pagkatiwalaan.
Mm-hmm.
So from the end of the National Task Force, actually, is the rollout that we are focusing on. And we're very happy that most of the LGUs, number one, that we have been discussing with, there were many LGUs who have signed up with the tripartite, about 39 LGUs, no, if I'm not mistaken. So yung tripartite na yon is okay naman. They're gradually rolling out. In fact, many other initiatives with the private sector have been initiated, much to the thanks of the private sector, because many of them want to come on board, not only to help, but also to be part of the additional vaccines that can be acquired out of the budget of government. So by and large, the amount of vaccines that Secretary Galvez has been working to acquire or to get into the country has successfully reached the mark of being able to inoculate the big part of our adult population. So if I'm not mistaken, the adult population of the Philippines stands at about more than 70 million, and the vaccines that we have are more than enough for that adult population. So hopefully in our rollout, this is what the focus has been for the last few weeks, to include the help of the LGU, will be very expedited. Because in the whole world, I think there are about 15 million pa lang na fully inoculated, if I'm not mistaken, if I heard the recent data right. And we won't be able to get the herd immunity that we want unless the whole world gets in a part seat. So we're taking part in that effort. So for the 39 LGUs that have participated, yan po yung sa tripartite. And then yung inspection po ng NTF, nakakompleto na po tayo ng 16. We've been able to complete 16 LGU visits over the past few weeks to include NCR and Davao. So these visits have actually revealed a very positive development. No? We're amazed at the way that local governments have been preparing and assisting the DOH in the rollout. So we're very optimistic from the end of the NTF that once the vaccines are out, they come here, they arrive in the Philippines anytime soon this month with the initial deliveries of either the ones from the Chinese and the Pfizer part of COVAX. The rollout will be very smooth. based on the simulations that have been done. So yun po, very positive po ang National Task Force. At isa pa, hinihikayat din natin, no, because of the emergence of the new variants, we are facing challenges regarding contact tracing. But the biggest gut feeler here is the cooperation of our kababayan. Kasi yung huling effort po na contact trace sa mga UK variants, medyo nahirapan tayo dahil ayaw lumabas ng mga ibang kababayan natin agad-agaran. And napakadelikado po nito. This is very dangerous if we don't cooperate because the spread of the new variant might bring in more problems. That's why we're very careful. So LGUs are cooperating very extensively along this line because of the push of the DILG. So on the part of the media, what I can ask from the NTF side is to request your assistance to increase the information by requesting our publics, our kababayans, to cooperate. Na pag meron pong konting nararamdaman, mag-report po kagad para ma-determine po natin kung yung regular lang po na COVID yan o yung UK variant yan. At tutulungan po ng ating gobyerno na ma-determine na lahat yung klase ng nakukuha nating COVID. That's the effort where most of our health professionals and the national surveillance teams from the epidemiology side is focusing on. Para hindi na lumaki yung problema natin as we gradually ease and as we gradually give our economy an opportunity to revive. So by and large, yun lang po. Much of the vaccine program that you have heard from Yusek Berhere is the same that I would like to report. And if you're interested to find out, the number of vaccines that we still have in our portfolio remains the same, about 44 million from the COVAX facility, 10 to 15 million from the Russian Gamalaya, 25 million for Sinovac. Novavax, we got some assurance for 30 million, 17 million from AstraZeneca, including the tripartite agreement, 20 million from Moderna, which includes also the private sector initiative. Then Pfizer's vaccines will be about 15 million, besides those that are part of COVAX, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is about 5 million because these are still in their phase 3 trials. So one thing I can add for some of the vaccines that are being developed, let's take a look at how Johnson & Johnson will emerge because pagka naging successful po ito, maaaring game changer po ito dahil one vaccine dose lang ang kailangan. Pero medyo matagal pa po kasi yan, kaya inaantay natin maigi. So these are the things that we are looking at, and as you've seen from Yusek Vergere's presentation, the prioritization are very important. We need to ensure that our health system capacity is protected, and very much part of that or centered to that health system capacity is the health and welfare and well-being of all our health workers. Kaya sila pina-prioritize. At alam naman siguro ng ating mga kababayan at naintindihan naman nila bakit natin ginagawa ito. Pati yung agam-agam or the doubts that are related to the rollout of the vaccine that kung may sisingit ba. We're emphasizing to everyone, including private sector, that the prioritization list must be observed. So maski na po yung sa private sector, ang uunahin po talaga nila yung mga nirekomenda natin na mga prioritized sector ng ating lipunan. So health workers po, frontliners po talaga. So by and large, the last item that I'd like to especially focus on is the effort of the Congress to help us deal with the indemnity issues regarding the provision of the vaccine. So we're working closely with Congress, the Senate particularly, to come out with these laws that are required and will support our ability to get those vaccines. So maraming salamat, Melo. Back to you.
Thank you. Magandang umaga, General. Pero please stand by. We will have some questions for you later para din kay Yusek Vergere. Anong impact nito sa ekonomiya, JC Punong Bayan, please? Tell us.
Thank you, Sir Melo, for the invitation. I have a few slides as well. I think we can start with the fact that right now we're living through the country's worst economic crisis in history, even surpassing, well, since we haven't experienced a growth rate this low since World War II. And so the economy declined by 9.5% in 2020, and that surpasses the previous worst economic crisis during the trough of the martial law economic crisis. And not only that, we are also recovering the slowest in ASEAN. So I was able to look at some of the more recent data from Malaysia and Thailand. And by far, tayo po yung nangungulela sa recovery. Note as well that Vietnam actually averted a recession altogether. They did not experience a negative growth rate, even if all countries were affected by the pandemic one way or another. And this speaks to the effective and prompt pandemic response of Vietnam vis-a-vis other ASEAN countries, including the Philippines. The economist expects that because of the staggering decline of GDP in the Philippines, we will be one of the countries that will be suffering the economic scars of the pandemic for a very long time. What sectors of the economy were affected the most? Well, our economy for the longest time has been driven by consumption by private individuals and households. And because of the lockdowns and quarantine measures, that experienced a significant decline in the past few quarters. But note as well that investment spending took a hit. So this is important because in the future, for future economic growth, investment is important. And if people are not investing, we cannot expect the economy to bounce back very soon. As for the different sectors of our economy, all sectors were hit, but especially services, where you can find most of the face-to-face interactions that we are trying to avoid, as well as industry. So that includes manufacturing, construction, etc. But note as well that agriculture also took a hit. Some were saying that agriculture seems to be robust in the middle of the pandemic, but as we've seen in the recent months, there have been shortages of vegetables, pork, etc., that have driven inflation or prices very much of late. Aside from the GDP data, you can see the decline of the Philippine economy from mobility data, so from movements of people, of Filipinos, especially in public places. And you can see here that especially during the lockdown in March and April last year, there was a significant decline in mobility in public areas. So people have been hunkering down in their homes because of the pandemic. But note that even with the looser quarantine restrictions, people have remained in their houses. So we're far from going back to pre-pandemic levels. So in short, people are still afraid of the virus, even if quarantine restrictions have been looser. And note as well that the decline in mobility in the Philippines is arguably the worst in ASEAN. Vietnam also took a hit when it comes to mobility, especially when they had the nationwide lockdown in April, but they recovered pretty quickly compared to us. The ADB estimated that about 71% of firms in the Philippines closed last year because of the pandemic, and that is one of the highest rates in ASEAN. This is corroborated by data from the World Bank, which found that 77% of firms closed in April temporarily, but actually by July, 15% permanently closed. And you can see that permanent closures can be seen across all the important sectors of our economy. We don't want firms to die down because the recovery of the economy at large will be much more difficult if we allow firms to die in the process. This is not to say that 100% of industries in the economy contracted. In fact, some flourished, including the internet economy as people move to the internet for shopping, for food deliveries, etc. But note that online travel bookings have declined significantly. Despite that, the internet economy of the Philippines is estimated to have grown 6% last year. Because of the recession we are in, the average Filipino's income dropped to its lowest level since 2015. So you might say that the economic gains of the past 5 years have been erased by the pandemic. And the percentage of Filipino households with savings dropped as well to a record low. And this is disturbing as people spent the money they have saved for various kinds of expenses throughout the pandemic. So this underscores the need for economic aid. People have lost their savings and people need supplementary income from government. As for the labor market, the unemployment rate also skyrocketed to its highest level on record, 17.6% in April last year, although that subsided already. But this hides the economic suffering of Filipinos because millions of Filipinos have actually dropped out of the labor force. And if you are not in the labor force, you will not be counted among the ranks of the employed and the unemployed. The underemployment rate also, there was an uptick as well for underemployment, but not as high as unemployment. As for joblessness, so the SWS also collects data on joblessness, and this kind of corroborates the findings of the official statistics of government. This is the more disturbing part. The labor force participation rate has declined to its record low. So people, for example, have chosen to opt out of labor force because of the dearth of good job opportunities, as well as the need to look after their children, especially with the onset of online learning. So if adult Filipinos are staying at home and not in the labor force, the economy will not recover anytime soon. So we need to get them back to the labor force as soon as possible. Job losses were seen across virtually all sectors of the economy, especially in April last year, especially in services, industry, and agriculture. But in the latter parts of 2020, we saw enormous job losses in agriculture as well because of the onset of typhoons. There's a gender aspect to this as well, because women are more likely to be among those who are new members of those out of the labor force as they look after their children. So there's a disproportionate impact on women in the labor force. OFWs, so almost 400,000 OFWs have been created by end of 2020, and this is important because remittances have declined to a record low. So for the first time in several years, OFW remittances are in the red. And this is important because OFW remittances fuel consumption spending. So we cannot expect consumption spending to go back to pre-pandemic levels if OFW remittances, the inflow of them, are this low. And this is compounded by the fact that the peso has been appreciating of late. So it's especially hard on the families of OFWs. So OFWs have to remit more money to compensate for the strengthening of the peso. Hunger as well reached an all-time high. So about 1 out of 3 Filipino households experienced some sort of hunger because of the pandemic. And poverty as well, there was an uptick there. And it's estimated that about 5.5 million Filipinos can be pushed into poverty if they do not receive enough economic aid from government. There's also a risk of a K-shaped recovery where at the beginning, both rich and poor suffer from the pandemic, but over time, the rich will recover much faster than the poor. Economic misery is at an all-time high, so there's economic pessimism going on. So the percentage of economic losers versus economic gainers is at a record high. Net personal optimism on the economy is also suffering, and the consumer confidence index collected by the Bangko Sentral also reached a record low. Okay. And on top of all these, prices are also accelerating of late. So we experienced a 4.2% inflation rate last month, January of this year. And this is especially higher for the bottom 30% of Filipinos on the income scale. This is driven mainly by the rise of food prices. And when you break down the food data, you will see that meat and vegetables especially contributed to the skyrocketing of prices of late. So just to recap, so people's incomes have been diminished, they have lost their jobs, and on top of all that, prices are skyrocketing. So economic misery is really at an all-time high. And inflation is especially high in Cagayan Valley and Bicol. So amid rampant economic suffering and uncertainty, now is not the time to scrimp. Even economists worldwide are saying that governments really need to stimulate the economy, not really stimulate the economy, but provide the economic relief for people who have lost their jobs and incomes. Monetary policy is also one way to address this. So policies by the Bangko Sentral to reduce interest rates to induce banks to lend. But in fact, bank lending has also reached a record low. Banks have reportedly tightened their requirements, and people are also hesitating to borrow because of the incomes they have lost. So monetary policy doesn't seem to be working well to stimulate the economy. In fact, the proportion of non-performing loans as well as credit card delinquencies are also surging. So it is really important for the government to step up and meet the moment by spending on economic aid. And the economic managers are unfortunately scrimping too much. They are overly afraid of the deficits and the debt that will result from this. Even now, the debt to GDP ratio is already in excess of 50%, the highest since around 2010. But most of that new debt comes from domestic debt actually, and not debt from external sources. It's not as if money is a problem. For example, the Bangko Sentral has been lending the national government about 300 billion, 540 billion, and two rounds of that actually in October and December. Government has no trouble borrowing from the local market, and the DOF has been signing loans left and right. But unfortunately, the government is scrimping unreasonably. So if you compare, for example, the Bayanihan 1, 2, and the proposed Bayanihan 3 packages, they pale in comparison next to the extent of the economic crisis that we have, next to the losses that we have endured so far. So the government's response has been disproportionately small compared to the extent of the crisis. And we need to see more of that. So for example, you have the social amelioration program last year, which lasted only 2 months. We need more of that actually, even if it could be marred by politicking, etc. People need to survive. They need money. They don't have money to spend, and we have to give them money if we want the economy to recover. Firms as well need to receive enough economic aid. As I said, we can't afford to let them die left and right. Unfortunately, the economic managers have this misplaced austerity, and there's inordinate fiscal conservatism among them. And they seem to be unaware of the debates going on and the change in consensus actually across the world when it comes to economic and fiscal spending in the time of this health crisis. And even on top of this, government has a hard time spending the money it already has. So for example, disbursements last year shrank. Disbursements by the Bureau of the Treasury, as well as capital outlays by the DBM, and the spending for the Bayanihan packages have been not very satisfactory. Just a few more slides, Sir Melo. So the 2021 budget is really, really crucial, but unfortunately, the government chose to pour money instead on infrastructure projects. So for example, the local program of the DPWH received some of the biggest increases in budget. So you would think that more of that money should go instead for the Department of Health and the frontliners who are really need more finances, as well as economic aid for the poor. And unfortunately, the government has been pushing policies that are not remotely related to the pandemic response, including build, corporate tax cuts, as well as a financial aid for corporations and aid for banks. Lastly, to recover, we need 2 injections. Number 1 will be the COVID-19 vaccines, and number 2, cash injections in the economy, especially going to the poor. Unfortunately, the economist estimates that at the rate that we are proceeding, most of Filipinos won't be vaccinated until 2023. So we need to expedite the vaccination procurement and deployment. And currently, Congress, some lawmakers are pushing for Bayanihan 3 to the tune of around 420 billion. We need more of that, because especially money in the form of cash transfers for the poor and for businesses. Lastly, so I think the biggest debate right now would be opening up the economy. So merely doing that won't work because even in the past months, the economy has already been a lot more open compared to March and April last year, and yet the economy doesn't seem to be revving up. So even in the U.S., there are studies showing that U.S. states that have opened haven't actually seen a lot of consumer spending despite the looser quarantine restrictions. So as long as people are afraid to go out of their houses and spend, the economy won't recover. So I think this emphasizes the last point, which is fix the health crisis first, and then you can expect the economy to recover later. Thank you, Sir Melo.
Thank you. Thank you. Maraming salamat po. So parang nakakalungkot yun, pero para kay Yusek, Rosette, please stand by. Meron pong tanong para sa inyo. Kaya lang, eto na po si Father Nick Austriaco, all the way from Rhode Island sa Estados Unidos. Father Nick, asan na po kayo? Please go ahead. Please unmute yourself and go ahead with the presentation.
So thank you very much, Sir Melo, and hello from the United States. I've been asked to speak about vaccines, so I'm going to speak primarily about this the effect of vaccines on pandemics, the most recent data we have on that, as well as the science of vaccines in order to speak truth to the Filipino people, many of whom are still experiencing vaccine hesitancy. So this, of course, is the pandemic as of this morning here in the United States. So we are approaching 110 million official cases of COVID-19. This, of course, is undercounted because we believe that more people have been infected than has been tested. 2.5 million deaths officially. In the Philippines, it has been relatively low compared to what we are seeing in the United States. Only 500,000 official cases with 11,524 deaths. Now, I would like to present some data to reinforce one of the key messages of my lecture today, that vaccines end pandemics, because a lot of people, especially here in the United States, actually are not sure if the vaccines will do this. So we're going to look at some of the data that is coming out of Israel. And so you need to know that vaccines in Israel began on December 19th. Israel also imposed a third national lockdown on January 8th. So we are going to have to be able to disentangle the effect of the vaccinations from the effect of a national lockdown. I also need to point out that vaccines take 2 weeks to begin to show any effect on population numbers. So this is just a graph that I obtained from our World in Data. And what you can see here is that in purple, you have the percentage of Israeli senior citizens who have received 1 dose. And then in blue, light blue here, you have over 60s, 2 doses who are fully vaccinated. And what you can see now is that over 60s, most of the senior citizens in Israel, 80% of them have been vaccinated as of the end of January, 2 doses. Now, so one of the things, and they expect to vaccinate the entire country by the end of next month. And they are vaccinating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop, in order for them to vaccinate their entire population of 9 million. Now, it's important to see that we are talking about Israel, but Israel as a country is still smaller than the NCR, which has a number of about 13 million Filipinos. What you can see now is that around January 15th, the effect of both the lockdown and the vaccines have led to a dramatic drop in the number of COVID-19 daily cases. But what is really striking is that if you look at the new hospitalizations by age. Now remember, the senior citizens are vaccinated, the younger ones are not. And what you're beginning to see on January 15th is that the number of senior citizens is dramatically dropping in terms of hospitalizations, even though the hospitalizations from non-senior citizens has not dropped. And so what you can see here is this is a direct measure of the effect of the vaccination rather than of the lockdown. And so by vaccinating 80% of their senior citizens, they have been able to practically half the number of senior citizens in a hospital within 1 month, a 1 month period of time. You see this as well for severe COVID. So this is severe COVID. Again, the number of severe cases, ICU cases, for those who have been vaccinated has dramatically dropped in 1 month. And you can see that because the senior citizens are not going into the ICU, even though the other citizens of Israel are still continuing to increase. So what you're seeing here is that the vaccines are turning COVID-19 into a normal, non-lethal corona cold. So I would like to point out that there are 4 coronaviruses that are commonly found in the world. And if you get them, you basically have a normal cold. And what we're seeing now is the vaccines are transforming COVID-19 into the 5th corona cold. And that really is the goal for the vaccine program. It is not to prevent you from getting COVID. It is to prevent you from getting severe COVID that you would have to enter the hospital and be treated there. And tragically, for some, they will die. To give you a sense of the side effects reported to doctors. So again, this is the population out of First dose, nearly 2.8 million Israelis, only 6,575 had side effects after the first dose that were reported to doctors. We will talk about what those side effects are shortly. For the second dose, out of 1.4 million Israelis, only about 4,000 of Israelis had to go to the hospital because of side effects associated with this. Please note that this is the Pfizer vaccine. And the reason why Israel was able to do all of this is that it paid a premium price for the Pfizer vaccine, and it also promised to report all its data back so that the world would have a sense of the effect of a vaccine on a normal country and its population. So now I would like to move to the science of vaccines, especially for those in the media who are trying to understand what these vaccines work. The most important thing that you need to know in terms of the science is that antibodies destroy SARS-CoV-2. And we do not have antibodies normally, which is why we are so vulnerable to COVID-19. And the goal for these vaccines is to help your body to make the antibodies that destroy SARS-CoV-2. This is a very famous picture of the first woman in the United Kingdom receiving an AstraZeneca. I believe it was a Pfizer vaccine. And she was the very first person in the world to be vaccinated outside of a clinical trial. She is 91 years old. And what is not often recognized is that the nurse who vaccinated her is a Filipina who has been working for many decades in the NHS in the United Kingdom. So there are different vaccine delivery systems available at this time. There are 4 major versions. And a vaccine delivery system is a system that will bring the part of the virus or the virus into your body without making you sick. So there are viral vectors. AstraZeneca, for example, and Gamaleya are known for this. The RNA vectors, Pfizer and Moderna, the whole virus, this is Sinopharm and Sinovac. And the protein subunit, primarily we think about that now is Novavax. So these are the 4 primary delivery systems that are available today. And what they deliver is that they deliver the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So this is a picture of the SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 virus, and the spike protein is on the surface, on the skin of the virus, and we deliver that to your body so that your body learns how to recognize and to attack the virus. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of different vaccine delivery systems. When people ask me which vaccine should I take, I say it's like buying a car. When you buy a car, you have to choose. Do you want the leather seats? Do you want the GPS? What advantages and disadvantages do you have? So for example, for the RNA Pfizer Moderna vaccine, it is 2 doses, but they are very strict storage requirements. The Pfizer requires ultra cold, that is colder than Antarctica during the winter. And Moderna will require -20, so that's relatively cold for 6 months. When you have viral vectors, this is the AstraZeneca and the Gamaleya from Russia. You will have 1 to 2 doses, but what is better, especially in terms of the Philippines, is it only requires regular refrigeration. And so these are different vaccine delivery systems with advantages and disadvantages. This is some of the most recent data on the efficacy of these vaccines. So what you have here on the left are Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, and AstraZeneca. These are the Western vaccines because the data from China is still not been peer-reviewed and published. What you can see here is that there are differences in efficacy, where the Pfizer and Moderna are the most efficacious at 95%. You have a range from the AstraZeneca of 62% plus. Now, you notice here that on the right-hand side and in the middle, you have different numbers associated with the efficacy of these vaccines against the new variants. And what you can see especially and most troublingly is that the South African variant, the 1351 variant, seems to have the capacity to escape most of these vaccines. Now, it doesn't mean that it is not efficacious. It just means that it is less effective than the original variant that we are talking about. Now, one of the things that I need to point out is that, remember, the goal of the vaccine strategy is not to prevent you from getting COVID-19. It is to prevent you from getting severe COVID-19 that would require you to go to the hospital, which is why even 50% efficacy is better than 0% efficacy. So someone who has 50% efficacy from, say, a Novavax vaccine will still be protected. And if that person gets COVID, the COVID will be much milder than if that person was not vaccinated, which is why vaccines are important regardless of the efficacy, as long as they are found to be safe and efficacious, which is at least 50% plus in the course of the phase 3 clinical trial. So as of this morning, there have been 181 million vaccinated individuals around the world. There are still no confirmed vaccine deaths in 181 million people. This is at least one dose. So you have some countries where you have one dose, predominantly one dose. So for example, in the United Kingdom, the government chose not to save second doses for its citizens. It used all the doses for a first dose. And there have been scientific studies in the last week that actually suggest that this strategy of the British government has been successful at decreasing their pandemic numbers in the country. Now, with regards to side effects, and this is, I was vaccinated using the Moderna vaccine 16 days ago. So I can actually tell you about the side effects. So there are side effects. This is from the Pfizer and Moderna. The Moderna vaccine, which is 3 times more potent than the Pfizer vaccine, has actually has stronger side effects than Pfizer. So you have pain at the site of injection. I had that. Headache, I had no headache. Fever, I felt feverish the next day, the day after my vaccination. I certainly had fatigue. So the day after I was vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine, I felt really tired. I had chills for about 30 minutes, and then I fell asleep. And by the time I woke up at 6 o'clock for dinner, wala na. So all the side effects had disappeared about 36 hours after I received the first dose. I am scheduled to receive the second dose on February 26th. I will be fully vaccinated 2 weeks after the second dose. So people do not realize that it takes at least 2 weeks in order for you to achieve protection. And older citizens take longer to develop protection. So you may have heard of people who were vaccinated and then became COVID positive within a week. Well, that is because it takes 2 weeks to at least to develop the protection, and you only get that maximum protection 2 weeks after the second dose, which is March 12th. And I have a flight to Manila on March 13th. As soon as the 2 weeks plus the second dose plus 2 weeks deadline passes. So one of the things I would like to point out is that the side effects are a sign that the vaccine is actually working, which is why the second dose is usually more challenging than the first dose. And so we have been told, for example, for those of us who will receive the Moderna vaccine on the 26th, that we should leave the 27th completely open with no appointments. It's a Saturday. We will probably all be in bed, basically recovering from the second dose. Now, a lot of people will say, well, is it worth it? And as a nurse pointed out when she had her side effects, she said, having these mild side effects are much better than being on a respirator in the ICU for 2 weeks. So 1 day of feeling tired and feeling feverish is much better than getting COVID-19. So when a lot of people ask me why they should be vaccinated, I say, we have to be vaccinated to protect yourself and to protect those around you. There are 2 effects of a vaccine because of herd immunity. Now, current estimates are 70% of the population of the Philippines has to be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity. However, if the B117 variant is allowed to become dominant in the Philippines in the next few months, the percentage of the population to achieve herd immunity will increase, which is one of the reasons why I'm grateful to hear from USEC and the Major General that the government is working very hard to prevent the 117 variant from the UK from growing in the Philippines, because if it becomes predominant, then we will have to vaccinate more people than we have today. So this is just a very helpful view of what herd immunity is about. So on the upper left-hand corner, you have red dots. These are the infected COVID-19 positive patients. The blue dots are those who are unvaccinated, who are vulnerable to COVID-19. And so what happens is as the more and more people are vaccinated, so you can see that as more and more people are vaccinated, there are more and more yellow dots. The red dots find it harder to find blue dots. So what will happen, even at 25 and 50% vaccination, you are going to have a substantial slowing of the pandemic, which is what we are seeing in Israel, even if they have not yet achieved herd immunity. So a lot of people speak about herd immunity, and herd immunity is the goal, it is the destination, it is the target, but the journey there will already end the pandemic. We are targeting 75 to 80% of vaccination, and you can see what happens is that there are so many yellow that the red dots cannot find the blue dots. And so the yellow who are vaccinated protect the unvaccinated. This is why it's called herd immunity. And this is important because there will be Filipinos who will not be able to be vaccinated for one or several reasons. So those who are allergic to the vaccines will not be allowed to be vaccinated. Those who are immunocompromised for one reason or another will not be vaccinated. And so everyone else has to be vaccinated. We all have to be yellow dots to protect those who cannot be vaccinated, because herd immunity prevents viral transmission. And the higher the vaccination numbers, the fewer the fewer blue dots. You can see even if there is an infection, the virus cannot travel and the virus will be suffocated and die within 14 days. So thank you very much, Sir Mello, for the invitation to present.
All right. Mga kaibigan, tuloy tayo sa ating discussions ngayong araw na ito. We have time for questions from my colleagues. Itatabi ko muna yung aking mga personal questions. We have Karen Lema, the Bureau Chief of Reuters, Manila, na may tanong. Karen, where are you? Welcome, and please shoot the questions. Karen. Hello, Karen. Wait.
Hi, Melo. Hi,
Please
sir.
open your camera.
Sorry, naka-video birthday message pa pala ako. Sorry, turn that off. For USEC reset, ma'am, I just wanted to get clarity on the indemnification. Is it a precondition before vaccine suppliers can deliver the vaccines? And how will the financial burden be shared? Is it going to be between government and the government and the vaccine maker? My second question, ma'am, isama ko na po. There was a news out of Japan that Japan is going to discard millions of Pfizer vaccines because they have the wrong syringes. I'm just wondering, what is the status of our supply of syringe, and will different vaccines require different syringes, and how is our supply situation? administration. Thank you, Melo. Thank you, Yusek.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Melo. First, the indemnification. The indemnification is a requirement specifically by manufacturers, and this was part of the agreements that we have negotiated with the COVAX facility. So in this COVAX facility arrangements, there is this clause for indemnification. So I just like to inform everybody that in this development of these specific vaccines for COVID-19, and we all know that all of these vaccines are still under development, manufacturers have clamored and have requested that they be that the liabilities against them be waived, since this is still vaccines under development. So this indemnification would be something that is required, specifically now that we are having these arrangements with COVAX, that there should be this indemnification agreement before we can go on and proceed for the finalized version of our agreement. So this indemnification would be shouldered by the national government. As I've said, manufacturers have that request through this agreement with COVAX that we waive the liability against them. And as we had been informed, all manufacturers are requiring that as of the moment because of their vaccines are still under development. The second question as to this Japan discarding, they said that they have thrown away most of their doses. But this Pfizer vaccine is very particular as to the number of doses in each of their vials. Now, in the first preparation of the Pfizer vaccine, they have submitted through their EUA a 5 doses per vial in their attachments. But later on, they have revised to make it as 6 doses per vial. They are requiring these dead space syringes where you can be able to efficiently and you can maximize the whole 6 doses per vial. But in the ordinary syringes that we have right now, it takes the healthcare workers are having difficulty in extracting the last dose, because if you would try to observe the vial, if you will be extracting already the 5 doses, you will be left with just 0.3, because 0.3 ml is the dose per person. So if it's just 0.3, it's very difficult for a normal or the regular syringe and needle to extract it from the vial. So Japan was not able, maybe apparently, to get this dead space syringe. And as what our information, as what our suppliers have mentioned to us, we are having a shortage of this type of syringes. But luckily for us, for this COVAX facility arrangement, they will be giving us a coupled or a packaged shipment wherein they are going to provide us with the vaccine vials as well as the syringes, and these are the dead space syringe. Now, how can we do this? So what the Philippine General Hospital did was to do a simulation because of this issue. They used a tuberculin syringe. The tuberculin syringe is the smallest syringe that we have in the market, where it can only accommodate, I guess, 1 ml of suspension or liquid. So they use the tuberculin syringe, and Dr. Legaspi has mentioned that they were able to do that. So even without this dead space syringe, by doing the right strategy, you can be able to maximize these 6 doses within each vial. So we are asking now Dr. Legaspi if he can be able to share to our other hospitals so that we can maximize the doses that we have right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am, sorry, Mel, just a quick follow-up on the indemnification, ma'am. Ma'am, so does that mean without the indemnification law, we won't be able to administer the vaccines once they arrive? Is that how it's going to be like?
We're trying to, as for COVAX facility, we are trying to negotiate that even without the law, we will be able to include this liability waiver statement in the informed consent form, so that there would still be this assurance for the manufacturers for this indemnification or the waiving of liability. But our direction is for us to have this law, and that is a part of the law that is being proposed now in the Congress.
Thank you po.
All right. By the way, for the information of our listeners, si Father Nick Austriaco Jr. had his BS in engineering sa University of Pennsylvania at gumraduate siya na summa cum laude, and then he went into further studies and he is a microbiologist. Mamaya he will give us an update on the vaccine he's working on. But we have a question from Mr. Attorney Getz Henike. Go ahead, please. And open, yeah, good.
Okay, thank you, Melo. Yeah, I have a question, very general. Will there be a vaccination passport? What will the vaccination passport look like, and who will be in charge for this vaccination passport?
General Padilla or Yusek Vergere, please answer the question.
General Padilla, would you like me to answer first, and then I'll give it to you?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. By all means, yes.
Yes, sir. The vaccination passport, we don't call it a vaccination passport here. We have a vaccination card wherein it's going to be official. It's going to be standardized across all areas of the country. And the national government, through the National Task Force and the Department of Health, would be the ones to manage this. What would be most unique in this card would be the QR code, which is the identifier for each unique individual. And this card is envisioned to be something that can be used officially, especially when international borders would already allow vaccination cards to be allowed to be used, a certification for them to be certified as vaccinated, and you can already enter a country. But for now, there is still no policies for this matter that you can already use this. But here in the country, for you to be certified as vaccinated, you have this vaccination card, and you have a QR code there, which is the unique identifier for that specific individual. I guess General Padilla would like to add some more, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Yusek. Yes, that's true. We have this system already in place, and most of the visits to the LGUs are these are part of the discussions and the alignments that are being made. As to the connection with the rest of the world, there are initial discussions, but not yet on a very mature stage, that will allow us to link our own vaccination cards into a global passport of some kind. But it's too early to tell. But this safe to say there are directions towards that kind of goal. And there was a soft launch for on the part of our BOQ, which is under the Department of Health, to link this with all inbound and outbound passengers already. And as Undersecretary Vergere has mentioned, the unique aspect of that is a unique QR code for each individual that will just be scanned and will show the data that will lead to a record of the inoculation and the data of the person.
Okay.
Can I have a comment on that? I just like to point out, I have been vaccinated already, and we have no system in the United States at this time for recording my vaccination. So one of the things that's so striking, I'm hearing about this vaccination card in the Philippines. We do not even have that in the United States yet. And I will have my second vaccination on the 26th of February. And I was asking if there were any papers available so that I could return to the Philippines to show that I've been vaccinated. And that is not even being discussed at this time in the United States. So that's just to give you a perspective, a global perspective about where people are with regards to vaccine passports.
Okay, so Father, you'll have to undergo another quarantine when you reach the Philippines.
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, I have to go. I will be quarantined for 7 days with the. I already have a reservation at a hotel near the airport. I will stay there for 7 days. I will be tested on the 6th day. I'm assuming because I am fully vaccinated, I hope I will not be positive at that point. But there is no way for me. You see, there is no. Internationally, even though I will be carrying, the hospital will give me papers indicating I have been vaccinated. There's nowhere in the world do you have the policy in place to address incoming passengers who are vaccinated. So I expect to go through. I am incredibly grateful that the Philippine government has imposed this quarantine, because the last time I entered in In August, when I arrived, they were doing the test when you arrived. And so we know the best science shows that the 6th day, 7th day out is 95% good. So that is the hope. So I am grateful. I'm willing to go through that quarantine just to go home to the Philippines.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let me ask JC. I know you still have another commitment, but given the data that you presented that people suffer, Yusek Berhere mentioned about the costings, out-of-pocket expenses. Who among the Filipinos can afford the vaccines if they are to pay for it? JC?
Well, Sir Melo, the best we could hope for is that the national government actually allocates substantial sums for the vaccine procurement. So as much as possible, they should be free for all Filipinos. But on top of the on top of the initial cost of the vaccines, actually there's another issue that we have to confront, which is vaccine hesitancy. Even if the vaccines are there, lots of Filipinos still are doubtful of the efficacy of these vaccines. In large part of because of the dengue scandal that occurred a few years ago. In other countries, actually, they're talking about subsidizing or even incentivizing people to get vaccinated. So in short, you are actually paying people to get vaccinated. So that's one way we can deal about that. But unfortunately, we haven't heard of any such plan here in the Philippines just yet. But certainly, Sir Melo, I think in the coming months, as the vaccination rolls out, we will see we will see firsthand the serious gap between the rich and the poor in the Philippines, and this speaks to the so-called K-shaped recovery that will be occurring in the coming months.
Okay, thank you, JC. I know you still have another commitment.
Melo?
Yes, please.
Yeah, before JC leaves, may I just point out that among those who will be prioritized for vaccination, as you have seen from the presentation of Yusek Vergere, the indigent population occupies the A zone or the priority zone once the health workers and the frontliners are inoculated. So it's part of the instruction of the president to the rest of government to do this. So we are hoping to be able to do that on an expedited manner. And more than that, over and on top of the government procurement, many of our big corporations and businessmen who are involved in the public-private tripartite agreement have purchased vaccines on top of what the government is buying. So by and large, they are going to be dispensed with free to their respective workers and perhaps even their dependents to help government also increase the capacity for mass inoculation, because we must understand that the devil here is in the details, because we've never undertaken a massive inoculation program as this even before. So talagang very challenging ito, kaya we really need to help each other, and we're very happy that the public-private partnerships that we have been able to assist and move on are well, in fact, most of these are just initiatives that have been done and may not have been duplicated in any part of the world yet. That's why many are looking at the model that we have done. So maraming salamat dito sa private sector partners natin. Madami silang nagagawa na tutulong.
Yeah, okay. Pero bago natin palayain si JC, I just have to ask Yusek Vergere and General Padilla and probably si Father, how do we insulate the vaccines from petty partisan politics? Because whether we like it or not, nakita natin yung SAP, may mga pinaburan si barangay captain, kaya nga kinasuhan ni Presidente, yung ilang mga barangay captain. How do we insulate the vaccination program from petty partisan politics in the local government units? Yusek, please.
Yes, sir. That's why we are really making sure that we have experts on board to draft tight guidelines, no? Especially if you see the prioritization framework that we have. And another thing, for us to ensure that the prioritization framework will be followed or complied with, we had these tripartite agreements, no? So we know that the vaccine is still under the Emergency Use Authority, still under development, and it is but right that the national government will be the one accountable for its citizens receiving these vaccines. That's why the condition of the EUA is for only national government to be authorized to procure through the National Task Force and the Department of Health. We can authorize local governments, but they have to go through a tripartite agreement so that we can have a unified strategy, and also we can be able to push or to encourage the local governments and the private sector to comply and align with this prioritization framework and guidelines.
General, ano po ang inyong pananaw dito?
Well, maski ho ang private sector, there are foreigners in the area, so let me just speak in English. Well, we've really emphasized, and even with the private sector, that even if they buy their own vaccine, they don't follow their own prioritization list. They follow the government's prioritization list, and they clearly understand this. The LGUs likewise, in the visits to the LGUs in the recent weeks, this has been part of the emphasis that has been made by the National Task Force. So by and large, the framework that was presented a while ago by Undersecretary Vergere will be the same framework that everyone else will be following. So that prioritization list is very important, and it must be complied with. And may I say that you could be held liable for not following it. Case in point, you might have been able to read about the article about a recent incident in the United States when a doctor exercising his initiative was brought to court by the county because the dispensation of the remaining vaccines that he had that was about to expire. So it was an issue of being able to weigh and not to waste the vaccine. So he followed the same priority that we are also following. So it's a matter of us being able to emphasize that to both private and public, and we are clearly doing that continuously.
Very good. Reactions from Father Nick, please. Your thoughts coming from the outside, looking in.
Well, I am the principal and lead investigator for the UST COVAX awareness team at UST, and we deployed a nationwide survey to try to understand vaccine hesitancy. And I think one of the things is that Filipinos are worried. As we have said, there's extreme vaccine hesitancy. I don't think it is ideologically driven in the way it is here in the United States. So I'm hoping that information and the example of people will allow our Filipino kababayans to move forward. I think what you're going to see is that when we asked our survey respondents, should politicians get vaccinated first? So 70% of them reported that they would want their politicians to be vaccinated first because they believe that if it's risky, the politicians should take that risk first. However, one of the things we also heard is that they were worried that if all the politicians, especially the younger politicians, went up, then the concern from the Filipino people is that they cut the line. They're the elite, they're the politicians, they're the ones who were able to get the vaccine first. So there's going to have to be a delicate balance between asking our politicians, especially those who occupy the top tier priority list, to be vaccinated in public. But we have to be very careful that we do not give the message that you have to be rich or powerful or influential to be vaccinated first. And I am grateful, for the example of the Philippines, that the indigent population is going to be vaccinated before the rest of the population. My American friends cannot believe that the Bronx will be vaccinated before Manhattan. So if you know New York, the Bronx is the poor neighborhood and Manhattan is the rich neighborhood. And the expectation in the United States is Manhattan will be vaccinated before the Bronx. But in the Philippines, I am deeply grateful that the government has prioritized the poor because they are really more vulnerable to COVID-19 than those who live in gated communities. And so it's an example to the world, especially an example to the United States, of how we should be able to reach out to the most vulnerable in order to vaccinate them. So we have a delicate balance in the Philippines where we are going to vaccinate the poor first, and I'm grateful to God for that. But we have to be careful that we do not give the message that the richest, most powerful people got it first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let me ask you this. Filipinos in other countries have been vaccinated already. Now, my question is, will foreigners also be included in our priority? Yusek Vergere, please.
Yes, sir. If they are here in the country, especially those expats and those living in the countries already, they are considered part of the population. We will not be differentiating between a Filipino and a foreigner as long as they are here in the country and interacting with their fellow Filipinos. They need to be vaccinated so that we can be able to protect them and protect the others as well.
Okay, very good. Very nice. I have a question to the three of you. How will we know if a COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective? This comes from Rosie Paula Cantara in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Um, and the question is, how long will it be effective? How long will it protect me? If I get the vaccine, do I still have to wear a mask? These are basic questions that I guess the government should address. Father, in your case, sa Estados Unidos, ano po ang inyong isasagot dito?
So we are not yet sure if the vaccines confer sterilizing immunity in addition to effective immunity. So I have to define those terms. So effective immunity is you are immune, you will not get sick. These are the numbers that are reported that I showed in my presentation. We still do not have the data worldwide whether or not we have sterilizing immunity. Sterilizing immunity is where you cannot even carry the virus. Now, from previous experience with other vaccines, what we see is that individuals can have sterilizing and effective immunity at the time of vaccination, but slowly you will lose sterilizing immunity even though you keep effective immunity. So to answer your question, to the question here is that one, we expect to be vaccinated, but we are still required to wear masks because we are still not sure if we will be able to give the vaccine, the virus to someone else. So I may be vaccinated, I will not get sick, but it is not clear yet if I could carry the virus and give it to someone, which is why I will, even in the Philippines, I will wear my mask and my shield everywhere I go once I leave the convent.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rousset, please.
Yes, sir. I guess Father Nick already said the salient points, no, as to these basic questions. But one thing I would just like to remind our public and the viewers and the listeners is that as long as the Food and Drug Administration of the Philippine government has issued the emergency use authority, this is already a guarantee for everybody that this vaccine would be safe and this would be effective to protect them against this disease. Now, Father Nick said a while ago, I just like to clarify this and give this information. The specific types of vaccines currently available that are under this development stage are not transmission blocking, meaning it cannot prevent you from getting the disease. What this vaccine promises all of us would be there would be lesser chances of having clinical symptoms, meaning if you get the virus is with you, but you won't manifest this kind of symptoms that you may manifest if you do not have the vaccine. Also, the promise of this vaccine is for lesser chances of getting severe infections, therefore lesser chances of being hospitalized, and lesser chances of dying. And I guess ito pong this benefits that I've just mentioned is enough already for us to be confident and to really receive the vaccine, because it would give us life-saving strategy for us to be able to stop deaths in the country and to ease the burden in our health system. So again, let me just reiterate, the FDA's emergency use authority is a guarantee for all Filipinos that these vaccines will be safe and it's going to be of quality and it's going to be effective for the population.
Okay. General, would you care to add?
Thank you, Melo. Thank you very much. First off, most of the salient points have been discussed by Father Nick and Yusek Vergere. But if I may just add, herein lies the great assistance that can come from media. That we need to really pass on the information to all our kababayans that the vaccine, once completed, does not make you go back to the pre-COVID days. It does not give you the passport to practice pre-COVID practices again. Because again, as was mentioned, hindi pa tapos yung study. The study regarding its complete coverage is not yet completed. So you may have, that's why it was not, sabi ni Yusek Vergere, that does not block or prevent you from having COVID, same as what Father Nick said. So you may be able to pass it. So that's why you need to keep that mask on. You need to keep that face shield on whenever you go out. So the wearing of face mask, the wearing of face shield will be here to stay. And as we have been repeatedly saying and communicating to the public, this is actually the new normal.
Okay. Maganda yung mga balita, pero merong better news. Father Nick, yung ginagawa mong research for the information of our colleagues from the media and Dr. Vergere and General Padilla, how far have you gone?
So I'm a yeast molecular biologist. I've spent 25 years doing yeast molecular biology. I'm a Filipino American, and I experienced the lockdown in the Philippines, and I became frustrated with the enormous challenges of vaccine deployment in our country. And so I am here in the United States for a month because one of the things, what I am here for is my students and I are creating a yeast vaccine delivery system. So we are taking a FDA-approved probiotic yeast, Saccharomyces boulardii, and just this past week, we introduced into this yeast the DNA from SARS-CoV-2 that will allow the yeast to express the spike protein or a fragment of the spike protein into it. And so hopefully by tomorrow, I will be able to see if we have a stable transformant of that yeast. And I will spend the next 3 weeks testing to see if this yeast delivery system will express and secrete the spike protein. And I hope to return to the Philippines on the 13th of March, where we will do animal studies. And there is already precedent in the scientific literature for this kind of technology. And if it works, what I would like to do is, and hope is that it would help third world developing countries, because you do not need refrigeration for this yeast delivery system. You do not need injections. You do not need syringes. You do not need doctors. You do not need nurses. We would simply encapsulate it into a tablet. And then you can go to Watson's now to buy Saccharomyces boulardii, and we would basically have a genetically engineered Saccharomyces boulardii that is FDA approved in the United States and in the Philippines. I mean, we would have to do clinical trials, but the hope is that this would then, for a second generation. So a question was asked earlier, how long will immunity last? We still do not know, but based on the other 4 coronaviruses, we believe that immunity will last about a year or 2 at most, which means that the Philippines will, and the entire world will have to be inoculated on a regular basis. And it's incredibly expensive. So my hope and my dream, and I have told the Lord that this is a crazy idea, but we will work on it for the sake of the Filipino people, is that this would be a second line vaccine. In other words, it would provide booster shots to the Filipino people after they have received the frontline vaccines with the highest efficacy. So a lot of people will say, well, what kind of efficacy do you want? I said, I want efficacy enough to trigger a booster reaction so that you have an underlying immune response, so that even if you got COVID-19, you would not have to go to the hospital. So that is the target. So again, we're working on it now. I hope to bring it back to the Philippines. It will take several months to trial. And then if the animal studies work, then I might have to send a letter to Yusek Vergere to have a conversation about how to do. I do not do clinical trials. I am a bench molecular biologist. So I would have to request assistance from the Philippine government to figure out whether or not we could test this in the Philippines for the sake, especially of the poorest of the poor in our country.
Okay, thank you, Father. Message, General Padilla, and the message from Yusek Vergere. Let's start with the General.
Melo, may I just defer to Yusek Vergere? I think she needs to leave immediately.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Salamat po, General Padilla, and thank you again. I'd just like to thank everybody, especially the Philippine Press Institute, PPI, Mr. Melo Acuña, Father Nick, Major General Padilla, and all the rest who are here. Salamat po. Sa mga ganitong pagkakataon po, nagagamit po ng Kagawaran ng Kalusugan. Ito pong mga ganitong pag-uusap para po mas makapagbigay ng clarification and information to everybody regarding the different response that government is doing. Isa lang po ang gusto kong iwanan sa inyong lahat, na sana po ang kumpiyansa ay naandon. Paniwalaan po natin na ang gobyerno ay ginagawa ang lahat para makapagbigay po tayo ng ligtas, ng dekalidad at saka ng epektibong bakuna para sa lahat. Ito pong bakunang ito ay isa sa mga tugon na kailangan natin para mahinto na natin ang ganitong sitwasyon na meron tayo. Ngunit kahit na parating na ang bakuna, kahit dumating na ang bakuna, kailangan pa rin po natin ipagpatuloy ang minimum public health standards. Ito po ang susi para tuloy-tuloy na po tayo makapunta dun sa tinatawag nating new normal, makabalik sa dati nating buhay at makapamuhay po tayo ng normal at regular. So maraming salamat po. Thank you very much also to Mr. Heineke. Salamat po ng marami.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yusek, and hope to see you soon. Again. General, please.
Well, first off, same as what the Undersecretary has mentioned, I'd like to pass on my appreciation and thanks to the members of this group, particularly to the head, Melo, for organizing this. Alam niyo po, among the most potent weapons that we have at this point is information. And information is critical. So the reason why we're facing all of these challenges regarding the reluctance to get vaccine is because of many disinformation that has been going on. And my call for your participation, for your cooperation, and for the assistance of media is to be able to convey the most critical and most important and factual information. Wag yung fake news. So we must be discerning. And we must be very careful about what we share. And same as what I have mentioned earlier, this is where the big part of media can come in passing on and helping us convey and communicate this critical information that our kababayans need to hear and need to have. So on that account, we will have been able to use this very important weapon placed at our disposal by God, which is to share the right kind of information. And I'm very thankful that I've heard the research of Father Dick and also the way he has explained vaccines, which becomes, again, a big part of what I can convey to the public as we go and talk to them, particularly to our other colleagues who are at the front line. So again, my sincerest appreciation on behalf of Secretary Galvez and the team from the National Task Force. We welcome our participation in these kinds of forum, and we hope hindi kayo magsasawa na mag-imbita sa amin para ma-share din namin kung ano pa yung kailangan namin i-share. Last point, again, same point as what Undersecretary Vergere mentioned. We are not going back to pre-COVID behavior. What we need to put in mind is that we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but getting there needs there's a need for us to get there by still wearing that mask and that face shield and practicing the minimum public health standard. Kaya even if we sound like a broken record, the usual mantra that we communicate to the public is huwag kalimutan, mask, hugas, iwas. Yun pa rin. Hindi nagbabago.
Thank you, General. For the information of our listeners, si Father Nick is a Dominican missionary. So let's end our discussions today with a short prayer and blessing from Father Nick, who's in Rhode Island in the United States. Father, please.
So I would like, first of all, I would like to thank you, Sir Melo, and the Philippine Press Institute for the kind invitation to speak as well on this panel. Before I am a scientist, I am a priest. And, so as a priest, I have to walk with so many people who are suffering and struggling, not only from COVID, but from the economic tragedy that the pandemic has triggered, not only worldwide, but especially in the Philippines. So, you know, today, so it is already Ash Wednesday in the Philippines. It is it's the night before Ash Wednesday here. So as we go through this period of Lent, let us ask the Lord for another time of reflection to realize that despite all the suffering, despite all the challenges, he still loves us and he's still there, and that there is always Easter at the end of Lent. And you know, this pandemic is one long Lent, and I am hoping that by the end of the year, especially for Pasko, we will have a new normal Pasko, so that, you know, with the rollout of the vaccines in 2021, and I return to the Philippines for Christmas, we will have the Pasko where we will have mass, but we will be able to party, we will be able to sing, we will be able to eat all that we normally eat together. And so at this time, you know, we ask God to bless our efforts, to bless our government's efforts, to bless all our efforts to fight and to conquer this pandemic. So let us pray in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing and your continued help in our efforts to fight the pandemic in the Philippines. We pray for those who are in the front line. We pray for those who are sick. We pray especially for those who will die today, who will die alone today. We ask that you be present to them and with them. We pray for their families. We pray for all Filipinos who are suffering at this because of this pandemic. We ask that you be present to all of us, so that even in this darkness, we will be able to see the sunrise that is coming. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So God bless you in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. With that, we say thank you to our guests who took time out to be with us, and to all the media who covered the event. Thank you very much to Philippine Press Institute and Hans Seidel Foundation. Until next time, thank you. God bless us all. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kuya Melo.